Hello, everybody. What's up? So some of you, obviously, I know because I used to be a Zester for almost 2 years, but there's a lot of new faces here, so it's nice to meet you. I'm Sheldon. So today I'm going to be sharing my personal journey with all of you, talking about what it was like growing up as a closeted gay man in an Orthodox Jewish community in Chicago, the struggles I faced, and ups and downs and highs and lows that brought me to where I am today, living in Tel Aviv. So thank you all for coming. So in the beginning of my story, like I said, I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home in Chicago. I have 2 older sisters and 1 younger brother. I was always known as the different one. There was always something that was different about me. My mom used to videotape all of us when we were children. There's so many, family videos. And even you see me 2 years old, 3 years old, it's very obvious that I was a little different. I was obsessed with my sister's tutu that she had. I loved playing with Barbies, very stereotypical, but it did. My mannerisms, just everything, there was something always a little bit different. But obviously being that young, I wouldn't have known what it was or anything like that. In middle school, I faced some bullying by one kid in particular. So I used to always get called the typical, oh, you talk like a girl, oh, you're so gay, oh, you're so this, oh, you're so, and I didn't even know what any of that meant at that age because I was so young. And I didn't know anyone in my life who was gay or part of the LGBTQ community. So it was something totally new to me. So I just thought I talked funny, and that's what it was. And then, as I was in middle school, in 7th and 8th grade, when you're going through puberty and you're starting to have these feelings, I started, as all my friends were starting to have feelings towards girls, I didn't really have that. But in my mind, it wasn't, it was something that I did wrong, as though the bullying that I endured in middle school, because I was always told, you're so gay, you're such a girl, all this stuff, I started to believe that it got so ingrained in me and who I am that it wasn't actually what I was. So there's a huge sense of shame, and I felt very alone going through these struggles because I didn't have anyone I could talk to. Like I said, I didn't know anyone who was gay. I was super close with my mother. I have a good relationship with both my parents, but my mother and I were really, really close. I would tell her everything. There was really nothing ever off limits. I would tell her a lot of things that my friends would be like, why would you tell your parents that? I was super goody two-shoes in middle school and high school. I never did anything wrong. I always followed the rules. My parents never gave me a curfew or anything because they never had to worry about me. My brother, on the other hand, was a whole other situation. So it was just I always just tried to be a good person and do what I thought I was supposed to do. Growing up Orthodox and everything, and the schools that I went to, they really portrayed everything as that kind of like a rule book. In school, we would always have these things like Musar speeches, as they called them, which was you were never praised on the good things that you're doing or you're progressing as a person. It was always what you're not doing, and you're not doing this, and you're not doing that. And it was always this mindset where I'm going to go to hell, so I have to do everything by the books. So a lot of the things that I was doing, I wasn't doing necessarily out of belief or feeling connected. A lot of the things I was doing is because it's what you're supposed to be doing, and I thought that if I didn't do this stuff, then I'd go to hell, which is a really weird mindset for me, and obviously it caused a lot of internal struggles. So obviously when I started to believe that I was gay, it was just a buildup of a lot of things that was very overwhelming. That's very overwhelming for any kid going through a difficult time and feeling alone, and that you're not able to speak to anyone, let alone a parent or someone that you're close enough with. So there was just a lot of stuff that was going on at that time. So due to the bullying that I went through in middle school, my father, who grew up in New Jersey, he was shipped away for high school by his parents. So he thought that it would be good for me to go off to high school in somewhere outside of Chicago. I ended up going to the school called TA, Talmudical Academy of Baltimore, as I like to call it, Torture Academy of Baltimore. It exacerbated all the stuff that I was going through, much more so. I didn't have my parents with me. I didn't have my family with me. I didn't have any of my friends that I had with me. And I was living in the dorm that was on campus. I wasn't allowed to have a cell phone. I wasn't allowed to have an iPod. I had to hide that. There was a guy a rabbi his role was the mashgiach of the yeshiva. He basically ran the whole dorm system, and then in the goings-on in the actual school, I don't know exactly what his responsibilities or duties was, but he took in all the boys that were in his dorm, and he was our parent figure. And he obviously noticed that I was different, and he decided that he wanted to make me his project, as he called it. The principal at the school was really nice, but after 6 months he left, and then another rabbi took over who was best friends with the mashgiach, and the two of them literally just would make me their project. Just as one example, well, first of all, living in this dorm, I wasn't allowed to just leave campus. Couldn't go anywhere without asking explicit permission by calling him on the payphone that we had in the dorm, because we couldn't have cell phones. We had a 7-Eleven down the block. I used to have to call him to ask permission just to go to 7-Eleven. Most of the times it was a no. So it was I was going through all this schooling that was really difficult. These rabbis made my life very difficult, and I was just it was just my whole life was revolved around the school, and it was really a nightmare. This is really basic of what it is, but just one example is one night I was in the dorm at 10 o'clock getting ready for bed, and the dorm counselor came over to my room, and he was like, "Oh, Rabbi Hershkowitz, who was the mashgiach, wants to talk to you in his office." And I was like, "Well, what did I do now?" So at 10 o'clock at night, I walked up to his office because I lived on the campus, and the hallways were all dark. His office light was on, so I go to his office and knock on his door, and he was like, "Oh, come in." And I was like, "Okay." So my Hebrew name is Shalom. My full Hebrew name is Shalom Moshe. He used to call me Shulam Moshe. Never went by that. It drove me nuts. And he's like, "Sit down." So I was like, "Okay." So I sit down, and I'm waiting, what happened? What did I do now? And he's just with this big smile, and he's just looking at me. I'm already getting emotional. And he was just looking at me. And he was like, "I feel really bad for you." And I was like, "Why?" And he was like, "Because I've been working at Beis Yaakov, which is the girls' school, for 13 years, and no girl is ever going to want to marry a guy like you." Oh my God, sorry. And for me, at that time in my life, I literally was planning on just none of this is real. It's not who I am. It's because of all that bullying. When we used to have to pray 3 times a day, I remember. Sorry. Sorry. I remember I remember asking God for forgiveness for what I did to myself. And I thought that all these feelings and everything were something I brought about myself. So when I would pray, I would feel I did something so horrible. I would just beg God to fix me. There's that phrase, pray the gay away, and that was literally what I was doing. So when the rabbi said something like that to me, it destroyed me, because my whole thing was I was somehow going to get through this and live that normal life where I'm going to marry a woman and have kids, just like my siblings did. In high school, both my sisters got married. So this was the path it was the home I was raised in. It was a path that I was meant to take. It was the community and all I knew. This is what life is supposed to be. So oh, hey, Andy. So to feel I was, I wanted something so badly, but it was being pulled further and further away from me, and something that felt unattainable, even though it was a dream of mine. So it was really difficult. So I went to the school for 9th grade. I did not want to go back for 10th grade, but unfortunately one of my sisters got engaged, and my parents were like, "Oh, it's fine, just suck it up and it'll be good." And so I was stuck there for 10th grade, and I was supposed to leave halfway through the year to a different school in New York, which I thought would have been a better choice for me. But then parents decided that they wanted me to come back to Chicago to go to school so I could be closer to home. So that ends up being a situation. It wasn't really a choice. So I ended up moving back to Chicago and attending a school called Skokie Yeshiva. They pronounce it yeshiva, even though it's yeshiva, but that was just like what it was known as. And so during my time in Skokie, it was in 11th grade and 12th grade, and I started to fall deeper into depression. Like there were days like, my alarm would go off and everything, and I could just like sit in bed, like staring off into the distance, like just not thinking about everything. I remember like hearing about people who would die, and I remember thinking to myself, like, why couldn't it have been me? Like, we would say Moda'ani every morning, thanking God for like being back here and giving back our neshama. And I didn't want to be. But I never wanted to, put my family through losing a child like that. So they really kept me moving on, even though they didn't know what I was experiencing. And in 11th grade, I was always so close to my mom, and I started to kind of pull away from her a little bit because it was so difficult having that close relationship with her, where I always told her everything, but I was hiding such a huge secret that was weighing on me so heavily. So I made my relationship with her really strained. And I would just like sit in my room and, go on Google, as we all do, and just like search like things like, how do I fix myself from being gay, or how do I change, or like, what could I do? And I ended up stumbling upon this website called Jonah. And Jonah, which ironically was also my father's name, it stood for Jews Offering a New Alternative to Homosexuality. And they basically, as I'm reading all their stuff, they basically portray it as like something that's like, it's fixable, it's not something that you really like, and I was like, oh my God, like I finally found this solution, like I have to figure it out, but obviously it was gonna cost money and stuff, so I would have to tell my parents in order to be able to begin the treatment. So I started seeing a therapist then, and I was talking to him about it, and when I couldn't even tell him what I was feeling, I literally had to write him a letter and made him leave the room in order to read the letter to then come back. And I wouldn't even like let him say the word gay because it was just too much to even hear it out loud. I would always talk about like the problem or the issue or anything like that. And I realized in order to start this, I'm going to have to tell my parents. I didn't want to tell my father. My father is like, he thinks he's like Tony Soprano. He's like this super tough guy, super like masculine, the total opposite of me, hard worker, like his life is business. So I was going to tell my mom. So I wrote my mother a whole letter, but the letter was like, this is the situation, but don't worry, because like my whole purpose in telling her at all was because I thought I was being fixed. I would have never planned to just come out. And I was like, this is the situation, but don't worry, because I found this thing and I'm going to be fixed and it's all going to be good. But I asked her not to tell my father until I got more information on it and then I would actually start the sessions. So I reached out to them and I spoke with a guy named Arthur Goldberg. And I was shopping in TJ Maxx at the mall, and when I got this phone call, and then I went back to my car and I'm sitting in my car talking to him, and he comes off as like this super friendly, nice guy, like not judgmental, like he really made it seem like he's really listening to me and he really gets me, and he's explaining to me like all these different things. For example, like he's talking about the Jewish aspect of it and how, in Vayikra, Leviticus, like where it says like how a man should not lay with another man, like how it says the word to'eba, or to'eva, he said it's actually like to'eaba, like you were led astray. And he told me that the reason why a lot of people experience this is because their mother was usually too overbearing and their father wasn't really present. And like, that was the story of my life. Like, my mom and I were super close. My father was always at business. He worked out a ton, a lot. And so I was like, oh my God, that makes a lot of sense. Like, he would say it's because you never learned that masculine aspect from your father, and by your mother being too overbearing, you were acquiring all this other stuff. So to me, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, great. That's like the story of my life. It makes sense. So I need to start this. So the next step was telling my father, because he's the one who makes the money, so he had to be the one paying for it. So I wrote my father a whole letter, and I left it on his desk, and I told him to read it. And then after he reads it, to like, we had like an intercom system in my house, so I would tell him to just like ring me in my room, and he told me to come down to his office. And it was the first time in my life, like, I ever saw my dad cry, ever. I never saw him cry. And he was just crying. And he gave me a hug and told me he loves me unconditionally and that he supports me in whatever I want to do. And if this is something that I want to do, he'll support me. And so it was the best conversation I ever had with my dad at that point. And it was like, oh my gosh. So now both my parents know. I never knew I was even able to get to that point, but I was like, oh my God, now I can start this thing and fix myself. So I reached out to Arthur Goldberg, and he set me up with a therapist. I was lucky enough where, because I was living in Chicago at the time, they didn't have any therapists in person outside of New Jersey and New York. So I did my sessions over Skype and the phone. So once I was set up with my therapist, his name was Thaddeus, and I was like, the name Thaddeus? It's like, I've never heard that name before. It doesn't really sound Jewish. And it turns out he was like Mormon. They have all these like therapists. 95% of them are not qualified or licensed in any way. They are also ex-gays. So they themselves have changed. So it's like, oh my gosh, it all makes sense. Before I even started, Arthur wanted me to go on like these retreats that they would have, but I told him that like I was too uncomfortable to go on retreats or like meet other people. Like, I would need to take things slowly. Like, I'm still figuring it all out. So I said to this guy, Thaddeus, he was Mormon, and the second like this therapy would start, there was no Jewish basis to it. So like the whole like Jews offering an alternative to homosexuality, there was nothing. Hey. There's no Jewish basis about it. It was very similar to approach to other ex-gay conversion companies that were at the time, like a company called Exodus, which was shut down, and a few others. But Arthur Goldberg, which I found out later on after all this, is that he was already in prison. He was found guilty and indicted on fraud, conspiracy, and theft in relation to municipal bonds of $2 billion. And after being in jail, he was on probation. After being off probation, he started Jonah. He started it with a woman named Elaine Burke. Both Elaine and Arthur, I found out shortly after, both have openly gay children, which was very rare to consider the fact that they opened up this program. I'm not sure if they felt like they were shitty parents or something, but it was just, there was a lot of like red flags. And in these like therapy sessions, you know, I was always the kind of person where like I like to look on the bright side. You know, life is difficult for like everyone. You know, it's not just like my life story is so hard. Like, we all have our journeys. Everyone has their struggles. You know, I think I do social media for work. I think a big problem with social media is the way that people take pieces and snippets of their lives and then filter them and Facetune them and all that. And then they upload it to portray a certain lifestyle that everyone looks up to them like, oh my God, like I wish I had that person's lifestyle. Or, oh my God, look at that relationship. They're like the cutest couple ever. Everyone's putting out what they want you to see. They're not putting out things that are very authentic or genuine. So it's something that I always like to look at the positive aspects of things. I feel like life is really crazy, especially now with everything going on. I feel like it's very easy to just get caught up in all of it and just feel like everything around you is falling apart, like the whole world's falling apart, and it could, put you in a depression. But I didn't want to be in that sense, so I always try to focus on the more positive aspects. So when he would talk to me about, like, my parents, my relationship with my mother, like, he would ask me questions, and I would, talk about things, and I'd be like, yeah, but it really is not that bad because, like, X, Y, and Z or whatever. And anytime I would try to shift the conversation into something that's like a positive light, he would get really angry with me. Like, angry. Like, I've been yelled at many times. And I never had that with a therapist. I've been to therapists before. Like I said, I was seeing a therapist before I even started this program. So for me, I never had a therapist that was yelling at me, especially over something where, like, I was trying to look at the positive aspects of things, because usually that's what therapists try to do, get you to do. As the sessions go on, a lot of the things just weren't making sense to me. So I asked him, I was like, what's like the success rate? Like how are they actually going to change you? And he told me that it works in a third, where it's a third of the people are going to change a little bit. A third of the people are going to change completely, and a third of the people are not going to change at all. But it's your fault if you don't change, because it means that you're not putting in your work hard enough. So the entire thing revolves around isolating me from my parents because they did this to me, and then I have to fix me. But if I don't fix me, then that's my fault. So basically, it was me and my parents' fault for this therapy that we're paying for, which strained my relationship with them even more so, led me into a deep depression. And I didn't know what to do. During my fifth session with him, I told him, I was like, I'm really nervous. Like, this is something I really want. I'm just really worried that it's like I'm going to be part of that, third that's not going to work for. And then he, like, yelled at me. Like, I've never been yelled at, like, from someone like that. Telling me that you don't want to put in the work, you're not going to do what you need to do, and you're wasting my time, and blah, blah. So then I'm like, oh my God, making me feel even worse, as though, again, I thought I caused this to myself, and now I'm being told by someone who is an expert in this field of fixing you, and he's telling me that, again, it's my fault, and I just feel completely, like, alone, isolated, and then beating myself up even more so, because if these changes aren't going to happen, it's my fault. So that's when I did the research, found out about Arthur Goldberg and his fraud. And I there was too many red flags for me. So even though this is something that I really wanted, I also started to see it unravel and realize that this was not at all what I thought it was going to be. And it just seemed very sketchy. So luckily, after just 5 sessions, I decided to leave. It wasn't going to be it wasn't going to work for me. I was yelled at again for wanting to leave, and they would call me repeatedly for months after that, trying to get me to go back in, and how I'm ruining my life, and my parents are going to hate me for this, and this is not what they want for me, and they'll never be proud of me. So it led me into a really, deep depression, and, that's when it began my journey of trying to figure out who I am, what does this gay thing mean, and how I'm going to be able to move forward in life and live my life however, it is. Like, I always say to people, like, growing up, like, I didn't know anyone who was gay, and the only people I knew on TV were, like, Jack and Will from Will and Grace, because, like, that was it. And as a kid, my mom used to call me, like, just Jack. She knew. When I was nervous to tell my parents that I wasn't going to continue the sessions, and my mom told me, she's like, honestly, it didn't make much sense to me, because I used to be a makeup artist. I'm not wearing anything now. But she was like, I didn't understand. She's like, well, like, you were going to get married, and, like, you and your wife are going to do each other's makeup in the morning? And I was like, yeah, it didn't really make much sense. So it was just like, it was weird. But I was so appreciative that, like, I had some friends who were forced into this, not by their choice, by their parents. So the fact that my parents are supporting me in either way was really nice. My parents told me, my mom said she knew as a fact since I was in kindergarten, because every day I would come home from kindergarten with, like, a full face of makeup, and she'd be like, where'd you get that from? And I was like, this girl in my class, Shani Abramowitz, would attack me during recess every day and force me to use it. The reality of it is I would beg her to use this makeup kit like at recess. So every day I would come in with full face makeup. So my parents knew it was something that they were aware of. They weren't ignorant to it. They were hoping somehow maybe it's not the case. For them, like when I told my father and stuff, he said for him the hardest part is seeing the struggles that I'm going to be going through. That's really hard for him. And the way other people would treat me. This was back in 2008, 2009, and it wasn't that long ago, but it still wasn't nearly accepted as it is now. And even today, there's many places you'll go to where it's not. Gay marriage was not legalized. It was still something that was very taboo. And growing up in this community, there was no one in the community that I knew of who were going through a similar situation. So, and as some of you may know, growing up in these kind of suburban kind of communities and everything, is everyone knows everyone. Everyone talks about everyone. I would go to shul on Shabbat, with my father, and it's all the small talk and oh, it's so good to see you, and all these things and everything. So I would always be so self-conscious in the way people are viewing me or seeing me or talking about me. It just made me really nervous. I liked the community I was in at the time, so I thought, and I was nervous about losing that as well. So when I stopped and everything, I thought okay, great. So now I finished this program, and now I'm at a fork in the road. Now I'm gonna have to choose. Am I gonna live my life gay or am I gonna live my life Jewish? I didn't think that it was something that could be intertwined. There was a rabbi at the time that I used to be really close with. And I had a whole lunch with him to tell him the situation, and he was really nice about it and told me, everyone in this life goes through their struggles. I would have people who would say to me, oh, it's a test from God, God does these tests, whatever, and it's right, but tests, even Avram Yitzchak in the Torah and stuff, it's he's about to, shaft and kill a son, and then they're oh, no, stop. So it's you go through challenges or obstacles, but there's always the light at the end of the tunnel, you're coming out of that. You take a test, you finish the test. It's not a lifelong struggle. And for all these people who don't go through something like this, for them it's so much easier to be oh, they'll be fine, or oh, whatever. And it's but you don't know the first thing about this. So how would you know? It doesn't affect your life or your kids. So for you, it's much easier to say something like that. So I was trying to figure out what am I going to do? And the more I learned about it, I never liked Gemara in school. It always drove me nuts. They say Gemara is supposed to help you think. It's great for your memory and make you really smart and all this stuff. But I remember the last Gemara I was learning, it was the thing was there was a guy and his cow slipped on his neighbor's cow's urine and got damaged, and then who's at fault in those situations. I'm sitting there in class why the hell are we learning about cows slipping on urine? What the hell does that have to do with anything? And then I started to realize that nothing in Judaism is black and white. There's the Torah, but then there's also there's Torah Shebaal Peh, and then Torah B'Ktav, and you have so many of the things that we do are derabanan in the Orthodox community, things that were given later on in life. If we just followed what was given to us initially, it's very different than what it's become and what people are doing in the community now. And with that, you had the Torah, and then you had Rashi and Onkelos, and then you had the entire purpose of Gemara is literally a bunch of rabbis sitting around a table arguing on who's right, and sometimes this person's right or that person's right, or the different split, it's a machloket, or So I started realizing nothing's black and white, and we learn about this stuff all the time. But for some reason, in schools, it was never a talked about thing. The whole thing, a man shall never lie with another man, was something that was always glazed over. We never went into conversations about what it is, why it is, what it means. So I started to realize that maybe I don't have to pick one or the other. I just have to figure out where I could see myself going. And this was the biggest part of my journey to figure out who I am, and what I want in life. So a lot of my friends, in the yeshiva that I went to, they, it's very common for everyone to fly to Israel for the year, for the freshman year of college. But they would go to yeshiva, and they would be learning all day. I wanted to go to Israel. I always loved it here. My family visited Israel since I was 9, 3 times a year. I always loved coming here. I'm not a big crier, I swear. And I'm like heavily medicated, so I really am not. But I remember every time we came to Israel, like whenever we would drive back to the airport, like I would cry my whole way to the airport. Like I just felt something here. I didn't know what it meant. But it was something that I always felt connected to. So I wanted to go to Israel for the year, but I was like, I'm not doing the yeshiva thing. It's not going to work out. And I've already done that. So I found a one-year program they had. It was called the one-year program at Bar Ilan. I was really involved in NCSY in high school. And at the time, this program that came out, it was intertwined with NCSY. And I was like, oh my God, I love it because I loved NCSY. And they had some Jewish classes in the morning, but they weren't it's more like Jewish history and stuff like that. And the afternoon was all my college classes, and I get the credits, and it's all in English, so it seemed like a great opportunity. So at this point, my parents knew about me. I started slowly telling some friends here and there, but that was really it. And then Bar Ilan started in October, and the May before then, we were on an NCSY retreat, and the guy who was the principal at this school in Bar Ilan, for the program, he was there. And then I was supposed to have a meeting with him to get to know him, to get to know me, blah, blah, blah. And basically, I came to my meeting with him, and I found out that one of the people at NCSY took it in her liberty to go over to him and give him a whole rundown of my life, even though she didn't know anything about my life. We weren't family friends. She didn't know anything about me, and told him that I was gay, even though that's something I hadn't told him yet, and I haven't even met him yet. So I go into this meeting with him, I'm so excited, this is going to be my next chapter and stuff. And then he was asking me questions, and he's like, oh, by the way, I did hear about, this whole thing. And he tells me, for your benefit, you might want to keep it on the down low and stuff in the program. And at the time, I took it as oh, wow, he's nervous, I'll go through bullying or get affected or anything like that. So he's just telling me, maybe you should just, for your own sake. But the way he said it, it didn't seem like it was don't tell a soul or anything like that. It seems more like a suggestion. I ended up going to Bar Ilan, and before I went to Bar Ilan, there was this website called FormSpring where people could ask you questions anonymously. It was and you could answer them. It was just like a forum. People would ask a question, you wouldn't know who they are, where they from, and they would answer questions. And that's when I would start to get questions are you gay, blah, blah, blah. So the first time, I officially made it public, because everyone says, when did you come out? It's not one day. It was this is the day, and I'm hanging up billboards and flyers and jumping in the streets hey, guys, it's me. It's something that's it's a constant journey, and it's always happening. So that was the first time I admitted it, and then it spread like wildfire within the Orthodox Jewish community. At the school I went to in Baltimore, they all found out literally in less than a day that I even posted it. It just because everyone talks, everyone gossips. It wasn't something that a lot of people knew. People I didn't know anyone, they didn't know anybody. So it was kind of the talk of the town. So I came out of FormSpring, and that made me feel a little bit okay. And then I told my mom, I was okay, I decided I'm going to get an earring. Because I heard, one of my friends told me, if you get an earring on your left ear, that means you're straight. But if you get an earring on your right ear, that means you're gay, which I don't even think that's really a thing. But I was oh my God, so then that's what I'm going to do. So I told mom, I'm going to get an earring. So I got my first earring over here. That was my right ear. And I remember coming home, I haven't told my little brother yet. And he's you got an earring on the gay ear. And I was I did? No way. I didn't even realize that. And he was he totally knew, but I just wasn't telling him that. We were 4 years apart, so he was in 8th grade at the time. And my brother and I are polar opposites. He's a super bro-y kind of guy, always about the sports. He was on the wrestling team, complete opposites. So I was nervous to tell him. And also growing up, in middle school, I had a difficult relationship with him, because aside from being my younger brother, seeing him was a reminder of the life that I'm not going to have, and what I thought I was, what my path was going to be, that's not for mine. So there was a little bit of a resentment or a jealousy that I was, facing these struggles, why me and not him, or or why either of us. So it was really difficult for me to have a relationship with him then. But yeah, so my freshman year at Bar-Ilan, I made a lot of friends. I started to figure out who I was. I had many awkward stages. I always tell people I've been through about like 18 awkward stages. I'm currently in my 19th. I always dressed the way I was supposed to dress, or, was told to dress. So it was the first time I was, I didn't know who I was or what I wanted to be. So, I would start wearing like nail polish, or I would like dye my hair a million different colors. And like I was trying to see like what worked for me. That's when I started getting into makeup. For me, looking back, I feel like a lot of the thing that got me into makeup initially is that it was kind of like a mask, and armor, and like guarding myself. I really started to build up like walls, against people, because it was really hard to let people in because of everything that I was facing. And then when I was in Bar-Ilan, my mom emailed me that she found this group called Jewish Queer Youth, or JQY. And it was like NCSY for gay people. And I loved NCSY, so I was like, oh my God. So they were having a retreat in January. So I flew in from Israel to New York for this retreat. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know where the retreat was. But it was the first time I was actually going to meet like people like myself. So I flew in, and I had an amazing time at the Shabbaton. It was so nice meeting other people. A lot of them came from also religious backgrounds, hearing their stories, sharing my story. There's many things that I'm very lucky for. My parents were very accepting. Obviously, whenever I talk to somebody who's like newly coming out, I always tell them that, when they tell their parents, like you were for years struggling with this and had to come to acceptance with it, you also have to understand that your family and your parents, they're still going to have that time of gaining acceptance and understanding, because even though like my parents knew, like once you like say it and stuff and it becomes like real, it's like, okay, like this is really what it is. So now it's like you're forced to actually figure out like, what's going to be, how is the community, going to deal with it. And like when I was struggling with like trying to figure out, being religious and not religious, like my mother, her parents became religious when she was like 4, so she was like religious her whole life. And she like when she sat down with me, she's like, honestly, like for me, it's much easier to question everything I learned in terms of Judaism, because like I have no doubt in my mind that you were born this way. Like you were always like this. Like there's not a doubt in my mind. And so like I told her all these things, like I was saying about Judaism not being black and white, and figuring all that out. And I started to really notice that there's a huge difference between Judaism as a religion and the Jewish community. And, it's like they talk about like in the Torah, like Klal Yisrael, and how we were all there on, Har Sinai, we got the Torah and everything. And now it's like there's so many different sects in Judaism. And it's like, you have, even in Israel, like in America, it's like you have like your modern Orthodox, your super modern Orthodox, your yeshivish, your Haredi, there's just so many different sects, and we're all so very separated. Can't dive into the same shul, God forbid, because I would never dive with something like that. So I started to realize that like a lot of the things that I've come to believe were a lot of things that were things created by within these communities, and how it wasn't necessarily a relationship thing that I had with God. When I first stopped keeping Shabbat, for my father, it was that was like the one thing he wanted me to still keep. He's like, can't you just like do it? It's not that hard. And I was like, it's true. I was like, I could still keep doing it, but the reality of it is it better if I do something because that's what you're supposed to do, or because I feel connected to it? Because if I don't have any connection to it, or I'm not doing something because I feel like it's something that connects me to God or anything like that, like what's the purpose? So that led me like on my journey. I experienced my first gay pride parade here in Tel Aviv. It was so much fun. That's where I got my like rainbow yarmulke, which I still have. And it was the first time I was like, wow, like I felt like I was entering this whole new world, and I felt like on one hand I was losing a community that I knew my entire life, but I was also being embraced by this new community of people who really get me. Like even when I would talk to my father about being gay, I was like, no matter how much I could explain it to you, like you can never fully understand because you're not experiencing it. Just like anything in life, someone could be talking to you about the challenges they're facing, and you might be able to relate to them on something similar. Yeah, I got it, yeah. But it, what was the last thing I just said? Oh yeah, so everyone has challenges and everything. So it was like, so it was like to have these people that I felt like I could connect with and everything. It was something that was super important to me. So my year in Barcelona was like, my best friend at the time there, her name was Ashley, and she was the one who like gayified me. She's like, all your clothes are disgusting. You need to order like all new clothes. She was really just trying to build me into like what I was supposed to be, which obviously was not who I was, but it's something that she wanted me to be. But in this journey in Bar-Ilan, I had a roommate who was also from Chicago that we knew each other, but I was really close with his cousins, but we didn't really know each other. We ended up being roommates. He ends up coming out to me when we were at this, like a week after we were in this program. And there were a few people in the dorm, these Sephardi guys from Brooklyn, who wrote all over our door, like kill the gays, get the hell out, faggots, all the stuff, all over the door. We had an Av and Ema Bayit that lived in the dorm with us that would check up on us every morning, check up on us every night, making sure we're at curfew, and they'd be going to our room, looking at this door, opening it up, and it was brought to their attention multiple times, and it was not going away. And then I had a meeting with the principal of the program, and he's like, I thought we discussed, like, before you came that, like, we weren't going to tell anybody that you're gay. I was like, well, first of all, I thought you were, like, giving me some sort of suggestion, so then this way it's like, it was something for me. I didn't realize it was something like, oh, don't tell anybody. I was like, and also, I didn't tell anybody I was gay. I was like, hello. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize I wasn't going around with some banner. Like, everyone who I would speak to, it was just assumed. It was never a question. So that was a whole other thing. That writing didn't get taken off our door for 9 months, which was crazy. I was lucky enough, though, that the Ema Bayit on the program, her name is Mrs. Siegel, and she is amazing. I'm still in touch with her today. And she got me through a lot of the difficult times that I went through. And about a year ago, I actually met up with one of the people who were running the program after the principal was kicked out, because ironically, that principal installed hidden cameras in the girls' dorms, in clocks and stuff. And he claims that it was because there was accusations of stealing, so he wanted to make sure that wasn't happening, except for he didn't live on campus, barely came to that campus, didn't tell anybody, so he was kicked out of the program, and he cannot run a program anymore. And so I was like, karma really is a bitch. And so he was gone, and this new guy took over, and he met with me a year ago. He reached out to me, I haven't spoken to him in years, and he wanted to hear everything that I went through, and he was crying and apologized to me that they allowed it to go on as long as it did. But as crazy of a year it was, and as much as the program itself had its things, it was the first time where I was on my own, living, openly gay, not with my parents, figuring out who I am. So, and we did a lot of partying that year. I don't even know how I survived. Now I'm like an old man. I'm in bed at like 10. But it was just like a fun year of like just trying to figure everything out. So there was positive aspects to it, even though, I had to like leave and everything. So after Bar-Ilan, I moved to New York. Both my sisters were already living there, and I moved to the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And in 2012, I was approached by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a big law firm in the South. And basically, they came to me, to my friend Benji Unger and Chaim Levin, who were both that I met in JQY. And then there was another guy, Michael Ferguson. Michael I haven't met at the time yet. And they came to me about this lawsuit with Jonah. I'm the kind of person where, like, I don't like to dwell on the past or focus on, like, everything that I've been through negatively, like I was saying before. I like to focus on the positive. But at the same time, I knew that I wanted to be part of this lawsuit, because even though it's hard sharing my story, the thing that made this program so much worse is that he's a criminal, so he knew what he was doing, and he knew that if he could approach Orthodox rabbis and tell them he has this organization, and it's like, it could change you and blah, blah. The rabbis aren't doing any research into it. They're not trying to figure out if it's legit or anything. They're like, oh, great. They say 1 in 10 people are gay. So for all the people that are going to these rabbis, you have that one person who goes to the rabbi and they're like, it's not really a thing, or, oh, it's just, something you're going through, but it's fine, or blah, blah, blah. So now they have this organization. So he targeted the Orthodox Jewish community because he knew he could get all of them to sign on to this and present as something legit, even though they literally knew nothing about the program. So there was 200 rabbis who signed this document that went out, which was actually really nice for the time, where it was like, people who go to your shul or in your community, if they're gay or anything, they still should be accepted into their shul. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors, all this stuff. It was a really nice letter. So Arthur Goldberg counteracted that by getting 250 other rabbis to sign this document, which was disgusting, and how it detailed how all of us are sexual abuse victims, which I'm thankful I never was. So it was just like he was actively trying to attack this community. So I knew I had to get involved in the lawsuit. At the time of the therapy that I did, I was a minor. So my mother had to also go on as a plaintiff. So it was me, Michael, Benji, Chaim, and then Chaim was also a minor. So Chaim's mom and my mother. This was the first ever trial of conversion therapy that they have in the United States. Conversion therapy, if you look it up online, it has been proven time and time again how emotionally damaging it is. And there's no positive aspects to it. It literally, it's already been discussed about talking to be banned. So this is the ever first trial against a company regarding conversion therapy in general. So it was a huge whirlwind. I spoke at Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. I was on CNN. I was on Fox. And as much as anyone who knows me knows, I would love to be on TV. But this wasn't exactly a fun thing to be talking about. So it was really weird. But yeah, I spoke on Capitol Hill, sharing my story and everything. Like I mentioned before, how I only did 5 sessions. I was very lucky in the fact that I lived in Chicago because my other plaintiffs, all 3 of them, they lived in New York and New Jersey. So they were in person with their therapists, and each of them have been sexually abused by their therapists who are supposed to de-gayify them, and they're recovering gays themselves, and they were all sexually molested by them. During the retreats and stuff, they would have pillows of pictures of your parents and stuff that you would beat with tennis rackets, as hard as you can, because these are the people who ruined you. So there was just a lot of really weird stuff. Sessions where your therapist would hold you in a fetal position and rock you back and forth. Really strange things. As I'm finding more of this out, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like my story is nothing compared to these people. Because the more I heard, the crazier it was. And then I had to go through deposition, and just seeing him and Elaine Burke, Arthur Goldberg and Elaine Burke, sitting there in the depositions, how are you not embarrassed? How are you not shamed? I don't believe that they really believe what they were doing. You both have openly gay children. This is so targeted towards a community. And so when we present you with this lawsuit, how do you think that you're gonna, they wanted to move it forward. They hired a legal team. So it was just a long period of doing interviews and Dateline and TV and all these things and putting together all the lawsuits. We had to do discovery, which you have to give over documents. Like I said, my father's name is Jonah, so I had to go through my computer, and anything that had the word Jonah in it had to be sent to them. He's got 1 million messages from my father. I don't know why they're entitled to read those, but they were. So the whole lawsuit happens and everything. As you can tell, I have 2 different colors here. There was awkward stage number 16. And we had fantastic lawyers. So amazing, so supportive. They made everything so at ease for us. We're always worried about how we're feeling, what we're doing. And then when I ended up taking the stand at the actual, at the case in the court, I had these really nice Ferragamo shoes that had these taps. So everywhere I walked, you heard taps. So my lawyers put me in the back of the room because I was wearing a full face of makeup. I was looking snatched. And I had these shoes. They're like, you're going to sit in the back of the courtroom, so then when they call you up, you're going to do like your whole strut to the front. So then the jury is going to be there as they're going to try to cross-examine you, like, oh my God, this guy just decided to, give up what he could have been and become this. And it's like, no, it wasn't really like that. I remember taking the stand. The lawyer would just try to get me on little things. Like, he'd be like, isn't it true that you convinced your parents to leave your Jewish high school only so you could, I don't even remember what he said. Like, basically, I used this as wanting to get a high school because I hated that high school, which wasn't the case, because the high school I hated was 9th and 10th grade. The high school I went to in Chicago was in 11th grade, and I liked the school a lot. I decided to leave and take courses independently through public school because when I was starting to come out, I didn't want to have any issues with the school and any of that kind of drama while I was going through my whole journey. So they just got me on a lot of things that were wrong. A lot of the things they questioned me on, like my letters to my parents, I would write Dear Mommy or Dear Daddy, and he was like, why are you 20 years old and you're calling your mother Mommy? And I'm like, first of all, it's just like a weird question, like what is that going to insinuate? But like for me, it's like these letters I wrote, I was 17 and 18. These are the most vulnerable letters that I ever wrote, so I guess it just went back to that kind of childhood thing. But luckily, in June 25th and 2015, they were found guilty on consumer fraud, and they are not allowed to run any organizations anymore. They're banned from running anything or being a head job in New Jersey. They were forced to pay all of us the cost of our therapy plus 3 times the damages, which I still don't know how much that was, because for me, the money was nothing about this. So it was like a huge chapter that was closed, and it was such a win. But obviously these people still had no shame, because then they tried opening up another organization using fake names, and also one here in Israel. So we had to then continue the process and have them shut down both here and there. So it was like, it felt like this was like, I finally got over this, and like now I could finally begin like my whole chapter and everything. So living in New York, it was great. I lived in a great location. I had so many friends. I was 17 years old, living in my own apartment, and I had a car, living in New York City. All of a sudden, like looking back, I'm like, damn, like I really lived it up. Like I didn't even realize how lucky I was. And it was a great time for me to figure out who I was, go partying, do all these things. And I still always felt a little bit like New York City is very, very small, but it's very, very full. It's filled with tons of buildings. It's overpopulated, but it's an island, and it's a very small place. And a lot of people in New York, even people that like you're friends with and stuff like that, it's a very dog-eat-dog kind of place where it's like most people would just throw you under a bus in order to elevate their own career or personal life. It's very shallow. Even like a lot of the friends I had here, it's very surface level conversations. No one really, it doesn't have that much more of a depth to it. Whereas whenever I would visit Israel, because I visited so often, I had a lot of friends here, and I felt much more connected to the people here, people listening, people being present, not always on their phones. And it was something that like I really lacked. So living in New York City, I really just felt like a needle in a haystack, which was hard. And the more I went to Israel, like I was saying, like I would always cry on my way back to the airport. And then I was like, I always thought I was like, I'm way too American. Like there's no way I could live here. Like I'm not Israeli enough. Like culturally, it's too different. But I started realizing, well, like what do I really have going on there? So I really started to think like, okay, I think I want to move to Israel. So I was seeing a therapist then, who I actually still see now, who lives in New York. And I was telling him, like, I think I might want to be moving to Israel, but it's not like I wanted to move in like an impulse decision, like where I'm going to like move and like, oh, if it doesn't work out, like when I started telling people I was moving after I decided, people would be like, oh, well, you're still American, so if it doesn't work out, I come back. And I was like, right, but I'm not going in with that mindset. Like technically it's true, but I'm not going to just, it's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I'm either going to do it or I'm not going to do it. So I thought about it like long for like 3.5 years. I thought I was going to have to go to the army, because initially like the rule was if you're under 27, you had to go to the army. And I'm like convincing myself. I was like, well, maybe it'll be a good like character building situation. And I was like, well, maybe they'll just give me an office job. And then I'm like, well, maybe if I go to this interview, they're going to see something in me I don't see. Next thing you know, I'm in like, combat. And I'm like, geez, like what, like a million different scenarios. 4 months before my Aliyah date, they changed it to under 22, and I was like, oh my God. Like, thank God. Also, because, like, and then on one hand, I was like, well, great, because all my Israeli friends are going to be like, and you didn't go to the army, like, and then I'm going to feel like, bad for that. But at the same time, I was moving my life here. I had to start making money, figuring out all that, going to Old Pond. So it worked out. So I moved here. I was staying at first. My parents have a place in Efrat, which is like, and it's like the settlements technically, but it's next to Beit Lachem. It's a beautiful neighborhood. So I didn't know where I wanted to live. So I landed there for a few months before I found my own place. I wasn't sure if I want to go to Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, but ultimately I realized Tel Aviv makes the most sense for me. So I moved to Tel Aviv. I moved to Florentine at first. My dog Milo made Aliyah with me. My friends were like, what are you going to do with your dog? I'm like, what are you going to do with your child? Like, he's going on the plane before I am. Like what's the question? We all went on the plane, took all of our sleeping pills, including him. It was perfect. So literally. So then building up my life here, like obviously there's so much bureaucracy here, things are so crazy, but I felt like I finally found a place where it's like, I could be Jewish, I could be gay, obviously you have the covered neighborhoods, they're not so open-minded, like even now, you're walking down the street, you have Israeli flags with the pride flags, and now they made the yellow bigger to represent like the hostages and everything, and I'm like, it's so beautiful, like we're going through such crazy times right now, and like I had so many friends when this war started, and they're like, are you going to move back? Like, it's crazy what's going on. And I was like, honestly, like, if I didn't move when I did, like, I'd sure as hell be moving now. Like, as a kid, my father used to always talk to us about the Holocaust, showed us photos and videos, things I probably should not have seen when I was that young. And he used to always say, like, just like, you think it would never happen in America, a lot of those people never thought it would happen there. So just like, know that just because you think that doesn't mean it's never going to happen in America. And I used to always roll my eyes like, yeah, okay, Dad, like whatever. And when this whole thing started and how everything just got so twisted, and like I was expecting things to get twisted pretty fast because, I've been here when we had the rockets and stuff, and you have all these, media companies that twist the narrative. So like whenever people would say things on social media, sometimes I would engage, and I would tell myself they just don't know. Like they're not educated. All they hear is from all this media stuff so it's like they don't know. After October 7th and how things were so clear and so out there, photos, videos, I woke up that morning and I'm just watching everything happening. My phone's blowing up. I'm like what the hell is happening? And I remember right before I left New York and I was working on September 11th, every customer I had that day, they were all like, oh, it's September 11th? Like, they all, forgot. And I'm like, that's a little weird. Like, I remember September 11th so clearly, and ironically, watching the Palestinians celebrating and passing out candy on the streets when September 11th happened in America. October 7th had just happened. A lot of these Gen Zers and Gen Alpha, whatever the hell they're called, they weren't there for September 11th, so maybe you could try to understand, but this was everywhere. You saw it on the news. You saw families being brutally murdered, kidnapped, babies. Like, for me, it's like, I always say, like, I love horror movies. The two things I can't stand in horror movies that, like, it's too much for me is when babies get hurt and when animals get hurt, because there's such an innocence to it. And so for anybody to do something like that is just, it's incomprehensible. And, in the beginning, it was like, President Biden seemed like he was really being supportive and everything, and I was like shocked. I was like, wow, like they're really being much more supportive than I thought. And then a lot of the friends that I have in the community and everything, a lot of them being Jewish as well, you have all these things, Free Palestine, it's like crazy, queers for Palestine. There's like that meme going around, like it's the equivalent of like chickens for KFC. It's like it's mind-boggling. Like, I don't think any of us would have wanted to be in a situation like this. Regardless of everyone's political views of the governments here, because I did vote 5 times, more than I have in my life, and I never voted for Bibi, but whatever. Just because he's the one in charge and everything. Like, I was talking to my therapist about it, because in the media in America, they keep talking about it's because of this right-wing government, where the reality of it is, personally, I do believe that because of the judicial reform that he was trying to implement and how we had a protest, it gave Hamas a perfect opportunity and window to catch us off guard. And as it's all unrolling and all these photos are going out, And I'm seeing all this stuff about Free Palestine. I'm just like, I really just, like, this whole thing has felt like a fever dream, but like this, like, I felt like the community I found and the community that I finally was myself in, I'm losing. And as someone who's American and Jewish and gay, and I grew up Orthodox, and I always tell people, like, even though, like, technically, like, I'm not Orthodox now, I'm more connected to Judaism than I ever was growing up Orthodox. And so to see all these things that are happening, and it's like, who do you think you're fighting for? And it's like, if I dropped you into these neighborhoods 20 feet from the entrance, like, you'll get killed. Not even, like, murdered, you'll be, like, tortured to death. It's not something that's recognized. They'd kill their own people if they found out anything like this about them. So it's just like everything has just gotten so twisted and made me feel so shocked. Or like, I have my nephew's bar mitzvah coming up in August, and I'm really excited for the bar mitzvah. But to be honest, I have zero interest in going to America. I don't feel comfortable there. All those feelings that I had of feeling oppressed and alone and silenced, I feel like going there now, I'll have that same feeling, which is so shocking to me, especially in a culture that says that they're so woke. I don't like throwing out, like, when people just throw out the words racist or homophobic or anti-Semitic or all these things. I think that we have to be careful in how we throw them out or in what situations we're saying them, because there are situations where it's really important and there is someone being racist or homophobic or anti-Semitic. But I think that when people throw it out very casually, it loses its value. And with this situation, in America, we're fighting for black rights and women's rights and gay rights and everything. But Jews just haven't even been a part of the equation. It hasn't even been thought about. And the more I watch the news, it's frightening to see how blatantly anti-Semitic people are feeling comfortable enough to be openly. And it's shocking to me. And it's something that I'm struggling with now. So, like, even with this whole crazy war going on, knowing people who've been affected and killed with this war and everything, I'm so appreciative and so proud to be living here, even with all the craziness outside of the war as well, because I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. I feel attached. I never was really into politics in America. In school, we used to always have to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I never really felt connected to that. But like here, it's like you feel like you're with your people. So many of these people who were kidnapped, many of us don't even know who they are, and yet our hearts really ache for them because they're our fellow brothers and sisters. And, in America, when shit's been happening there, which it has for a long time now, it's such a divided country, and everyone is so divided, and that's what's really causing all these crazy elections and everything. Whereas here in Israel, obviously you still have this, certain minority communities or, Haredi communities where it's a little different. But for the most part, living in Yaffo, where it's a very mixed community of Jews and Muslims, and it's one of the reasons why I liked it, because we're all integrated and it's all so nice and blah, blah, blah. And even there, like, the tension is you feel it. Things have just really changed. And I think a lot of this has brought us closer together, as difficult as it is to be. So for me, it's like this was something that was really a struggle for me. And I feel like, I don't like talk about my journey often. The only times I really did was during like the whole lawsuit I was in and everything. But I think it's important, I always get those questions like, how come they have gay parades? Like, we don't have straight parades. And it's like, everyone just thinks that, our parades are just a bunch of like Madonna and glitter and Britney, and it's true. It's definitely true. But it's really just saying, it's like, you have to acknowledge that these people are here. As a kid, like, I have nieces and nephews, I have 14 now, which is crazy. They only know me as I am now. They're all religious. They only know me like this. So it wasn't until, they'd go to middle school and I would pick them up from school and they'd be like, how come your uncle has tattoos? Or how come your uncle isn't wearing a kippah? Like, how come your uncle, is this? And to them, I was like, this is the way he always was. Like, I wish I had something like that. I didn't have that. And the fact that it's so important to educate people on how we're all on our own different journeys. Everyone has a crazy life. Some of us have more difficult challenges than others, but we all are going through something. Everyone is doing makeup. Every single wedding I've ever done, I'm not even exaggerating, every single one, the bride would be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, my family's crazy. And I'd be like, I'm telling you, every single client says this to me. Everyone thinks their family's crazy. Everyone thinks their life's crazy. Life itself is crazy. And if we all just learn to accept and love each other and appreciate us, and as similar as we are as people and being here and going through these kinds of situations, by distancing ourselves from each other, it just makes things harder. And I think that if more of us were able to be more vocal or open and share themselves in their personal life outside of the glamorized version of themselves on social media, I think it really goes to build a better sense of unity and community and feeling like we're all in this together. We're not alone. We're not gonna suffer in silence. It's important. And, for me, it's like, with everything going on, there's a lot of things that I could just shut down. I don't want to deal with it. But I also know that it's the importance of it. And even though not even just being gay, just knowing that, someone's going through this kind of situation, or someone just found out that their baby has, Down syndrome or something like this, everyone has their thing. And if we were just more open and just make people feel comfortable, but in a natural way, because I was telling Rachel on my phone call with her, the first wedding I came to in Chicago when I first came out, I had people who, I never spoke to in my life. They were friends with my parents. They'd come over and be like, oh my God, it's so good to see you. How you doing? But bitch, I don't even know who you are. They would overdo it. They talk to me, I'm like, I'm not a cancer patient. Why are you talking to me? And then you have the people who are just whispering in the corners, oh my God, that's the gay guy. And I'd much prefer those people than the people who are coming over to me something is, wrong with me, because something is not wrong with me. And yeah, so I just feel for all of us, just to understand that even in modern days in 2024, being gay is something that's still a struggle. Even in America, gay marriage has only been legalized for 12 years. But just to know that everyone's going through a journey, their own personal individual journey, and that if we were just more open to sharing ourselves for obviously whatever we're comfortable with, it would help us really connect more as people and really help give us even more strength to get through difficult situations like the one here in Israel. And so now today, living in Tel Aviv, super close to my family, love my nieces and nephews. That was the only hard part about moving to Israel, but they come visit often. And my family is super diverse. We grew up Orthodox. We're still Orthodox, but we changed a little bit. My two older sisters that were living that married life that I thought I envisioned, both of them ended up getting divorced because they were basically child brides as well. Because in that community, it's normal to get married 17 and 18. So we always say me and my brother have a podcast. We say we're all Brucked up. Our family's crazy. We have all these things and. It's there's so many people that would just come over to me. They'll just be like, your family is amazing. And I think it's because we all realize that what's the point? A lot of the things that we were doing, it's because you're worried about how people in the community are going to judge you or look at you and all this stuff. And it's who cares? Honestly, at the end of the day, who cares? We're all going through this life, and some person gossiping about you, in all reality, has no impact on your life other than the power that you're giving to them for having those words. So I think that if we're all just more open and more understanding to each other inside the LGBTQ plus community or outside of it, just knowing, just reaching out to a friend you might not have spoken to in a long time and saying I heard you're going through something. I just want to know we haven't spoken in a long time, but I'm there for you. You don't realize the kind of difference you can make in someone's life. If I had someone who reached out to me like that, it would have changed everything for me. So just really, make sure to do others as you would do to you, as you would want them to do to you. And God willing, we'll get through this crazy war and we'll come out stronger. And yeah. Thanks, everyone.